Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Hobby Cheating live Q&A. Another one. So today's a holiday here in the United States. It's July 4th. I have the day mostly off, the afternoon at least. And so I thought, make the best use of my time. And so I thought, hey, let's do a little, live hobby cheating and see if people ask some questions. So what we're going to do here is pretty straightforward. Obviously, there are comments and you can post up there. And so the goal here is to have people ask some questions and for those questions to then get answered as part of the show. So that's the basic concept. It's nothing too complicated. So I'm going to be watching the comments. So if I'm looking over this way, I'm letting that reload. If I'm looking over this way, it's because I am looking at where the comments are. Hopefully that's coming through okay. And we'll get started here as soon as I see some questions roll in. So the idea of this is pretty simple. I'm going to be here for the next hour or so. And if you have any hobby-related questions, anything you want to know, you just ask your questions in the comments and I answer them. It's a pretty simple premise. As to myself, what I was working on or what I'm working on today in my afternoon is just finishing up a base here for this guy, for a little Manticore dude. There he is. For another Chaos Lord. I wanted a Slaaneshi Chaos Lord on Manticore, so he'll sit on there just like that, trying to give an excuse for why he's in such a goofball position. So I figured he's dodging around some rocks. Thought that looked okay. Somebody recently posted one of those up where they had him dodging around a fallen tree, which I thought looked really good. So, that's what we're doing. That's what I'm working on. That and being frustrated by a Sister of Sigmar figure that I cannot make look right for the life of me. So there you go. And I'll probably have to repaint her completely, even though I don't normally do that, but that's where we were at. So let's see. Mickey had first question is not hobby related. When will Remington Steele be back on Warhammer Weekly? Back on, by the way. He's been on twice. He has his summer vacation going up, so we will have some free time. That's a good question. I'll reach out to him. That's a very good idea, Mickey. I do need to bother him and get Remy back on. So good question. All right. So Crazy Horse says, what colors would you use to paint pale vampiric flesh? Well, a lot of colors. Flesh is a multifaceted thing. And as usual, there's no one answer. But depending on what I was going for, and I'm just casting my eyes around to think about how I want to answer this question. Okay, so what I would probably use... Sure. Something like this. There you go. That. We could probably switch in some more colors here as well, but I just grabbed the scale 75 since they're closer. So what is that? All right. So for our mid-tone, we're going to start with some standard old basic flesh because it's still flesh. But what we're going to do is we're going to mix in for our higher light colors. We're going to take a little Miskatonic gray, which is like a gray purple. You want a gray into it. So I would probably put those two together. Then highlight color in with Moonray Flesh, which is a very pale flesh, my favorite pale flesh color. And then as we want shadows, we'd use a little Lendanus gray, which is a very, very gray or very, very purple gray, but darker than the other one. And some like Haster purple, some kind of crimson or magenta color. And then probably, maybe a little darker purple or black, depending on if I wanted really deep shadows. Something like that is how I do vampiric flesh. In general, as a general rule, vampiric flesh should still have crimson in it. Vampires still have blood in their veins, so you don't want them to be completely pale and dead. So there should still be red in there somewhere. But they should generally be more purple, a little more gray, a little, of a lighter pallor, less warm. What you're really trying to do is knock the orange out of it. If you were mixing it straight from like an artist's palette of just red, yellow, blue, white, gray, you'd mix up your normal flesh tone out of orange, but then you would add much more blue, and you'd actually bring your red-blue mix in together to get a purple tone. So there you go. That's my answer. Let's see. Any chance of re-recording older hobby cheating vids that had bad sound? Yeah, there is. I think about that a lot, actually. Because some of those older videos, in addition to that, I've sort of evolved the techniques, because some of those are more than 2 years old now. And I've honestly evolved some of my techniques since then. So I always wonder about that. Like, are people going to feel ripped off? Like, oh, you're just redoing content. So I'd be interested in opinion and feedback on that one. If there's value, if people would find value to me redoing some old ones, understanding that I would be adding to the techniques I talked about, I wouldn't be just covering the exact same ground. It's certainly something I'm interested in doing. Yeah, so there you go. Yes. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Oh, John Brennan Markham says he is painting purple spiders and Moon Clan robes purple. Any general tips on purple? Sure. Yeah, I paint purple a lot. Yeah, don't highlight with white, like in most cases, unless you really want to spend a long time blending. Purple, as it gets lighter, people tend to add white, and that's the wrong answer. Like, if you look at these two purple grays, okay, these two different colors, they're making them lighter by the addition of gray. So generally, when you're working with purple, you want to desaturate it either using black or a black crimson mix and get it down into a shadow there. When you're working on your highlights, you want to add either flesh tone or gray. White is too opaque and it gets chalky and streaky really fast. My other tip for working with purple would be know what kind of purple you're working with and make sure that you are highlighting appropriately. And by that, I mean purple is a combination of red and blue, but unlike most other color, like most other secondary colors are a combination of two colors. But unlike many of the other ones, it's highly, highly susceptible to how the equation tips. So for example, a very red purple, like Vallejo model color purple, that has a lot of red in it. So it'll read very magenta. Whereas something like blue violet, okay, will read very cold. The reason I point this difference out is because unlike most other colors, it splits the warm cold mix. Okay, because it's the combination of a warm color and a cold color. And if you put these two together and start highlighting inappropriately, you get something that looks out of balance. You know, when you have green, you don't tend to have the same issue as often, even though yellow and blue are also warm and cold, but it just doesn't manifest in the same way because red is so intense and blue is so intense. So there you go. So know whether you're in your cold purples or your warm purples and work accordingly. Okay, there you go. Those are my thoughts on purple. Okay. Let's see. Just why Renton says he just watched the end of month video. Thanks for the advice. Well, I know you're a liar. You didn't watch the whole thing. It's like 4.5 hours long, unless you live in a time warp, because it just went up like 30 minutes ago. But that's okay. I know what you mean. You watched your part, which is, I think, what most people do, and I'm totally okay with that. Like, fast forward, of course. I wish I'll be completely honest. I wish I had the time to go through and just timestamp everybody so that people could just go find their specific thing. But that would be a total nightmare. So if YouTube ever makes some kind of weird auto tagging thing where like I can record and just put in little tags, I would totally do that. But good. I'm glad the advice was helpful. All right, let's see. Next question. What color do you think would look good on Spirit Hosts other than the usual blue and green that everyone does? Any color you want. I mean, that sounds a flip answer, but it's not. You know, like Spirit Hosts are like spirits, ethereal, ectoplasmic energy is just a matter of a single color with not very strong low lights or shades that goes up into a white. If you think of like a Ghostbusters or a ghost movie, they can do slime and ectoplasm and spirit energy in lots of different colors, green and blue and red and purple and you know, I don't know if orange or yellow would work, but I'm sure you could probably do it. Probably orange more than yellow. Yellow probably doesn't have the depth at all. But, you know, anything like that. The key is just, if this is your color spectrum and this is dark and this is light, ghosts don't go past right here, right? Like ghosts don't have dark or black shading in them. They start just below the midline and then they go up to a lot of white, and they're sort of uniform, right? To give that impression. I mean, I think people use the green because nilic oxide makes it kind of easy. If you're, as a quick aside on that, if you're going to do the green thing and do nilic oxide, then you want to also have your Waywatcher green handy. This is your depth color for nilic oxide to actually make it have some kind of depth to it. It's just accidentally perfectly aligned green. Okay. All right. So let's see. Looking back, what is the most useful feedback you think you have received from the PMP? Mine is probably advice on Stone from Rock or advice on Glaze Media from you. I'll assume that's a question for everybody else. I've received lots of good advice. I don't know that I've ever had one specific thing that stands out, but I mean, every single piece I submit, I get good advice and good thoughts on. That's why, as I said in the review, why I highly value the PMP and why I think that it's the best painting community. Because we all do engage with each other and give good, positive, constructive feedback. It's the community that makes it work. So there you go. Okay. All right. So just looking through some comments. Multiple people saying go ahead and remake the old vids. All right, cool. Mickey says we do watch the whole thing, but we watch our own bit first so we can learn from the whole vid without fixating on our model. That's fair. You don't have to watch the whole thing. My God, it's like 4.5 hours. I mean, if you're looking for white noise in the background to get some painting done, if I'm helping you fight the war against the gray, then pop it on, go to town. You can hear Kieran and mine sultry tones. All right. Rethan says his was the third model. Oh, that makes it easier. All right. Well, lucky you. Okay. Kilroy said, are you planning on doing another video where you compare all the paint brands with this time with the same color? Yeah, I thought about that. That's a funny thing that I did that I didn't think about the fact of like using the same color. I'm not sure it would be entirely possible because obviously there are variations in color even across lines. Like, I don't know that I could get a perfect red match, but as a slight answer to your question, yes, but not in the way that you mean. By that, I mean, one of the sort of things I'm looking at doing is doing a across the board steel comparison. So I am a well-known proponent of Vallejo metal color. In my opinion, this is the only metal paint. If you're looking for steel, we're leaving golds out of this for a moment. If you're doing true metallic metals and you want steel and you're not and you don't want to do enamels, like an Alcade or something like that, this is the only metal paint. This is period. This is the best acrylic metal paint by leagues. Nothing else is even close. And I've tried them all. And I see the question go up all the time on Facebook and on everywhere else of what's the best metal paint? This is the best metal paint. I have tried 16 or 17 metal paints across every brand that I know of. I'll say it that way. I've tried every steel paint that I am aware of. And this is by far the best. It's not even close. So that being said, I thought about doing a comparison video where I actually show all of the steels next to each other and why I find that one to be the best. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Let's see. Have you ever worked on a terrarium piece, or do you know of any resources for storing minis in high humidity? No, is the short answer to the question. I have not. I assume you mean something that's going to be sitting, like you're doing a miniature that you're going to put into a terrarium. And so hence it's going to be like for a lizard or something. And so that's going to be like super high heat and wet and moist in there. I don't know of any resources on it. That's a great question. It's a very unusual question. I would think that as long as it had a solid coat, like 2 or 3 coats of varnish, it would be fine. But I would look into that. I'd Google around. That's an interesting one. I'll have to follow up on that. I've never thought about that. But that's a fascinating question. I don't know whether over time it could break it down. Like I said, I would think with enough, like with the heavy varnish, it would be fine, but I have no proof of that. That's just instinct. Okay. Let's see. Velotron, to get a smooth transition, do you prefer glazes or wet blending? Well, I'll answer that question with a massive caveat. I glaze more than anything else, but I don't use any particular method. If you watch me paint, I'm very haphazard. What I mean by that is, and I think this is where you have to go. You cannot rely on any single one technique. I wet blend, and then I glaze, and then I loaded brush, and then I, void blend and spit blend, and then I do 20 other things as I push colors around. It depending on how far you're wanting to go with a model. Like if I'm doing something for competition, I'm going to use any and every blending I can, because if you're trying to get an ultra smooth transition, you're going to use a bunch of different techniques, all mixed in together and up in each other's business. If you're going to spend 80 to 100 hours on a human-sized figure, you're going to use a lot of techniques, and it's not like you can do anything once. The real answer to your question isn't, is there a technique I prefer? The real answer to your question, other than this, doing it lots of times. Okay. Sam Len said something once that I thought was very insightful, where he said, if you do something and you like what it looks like, good job, do it 3 more times on the same place. And I stand behind that. Like, keep doing it. Keep pushing more paint back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. All right. And because you're going to keep increasing the volume and create and you're going to continually create more of that sort of visual layering for the eye to intake. So yeah, in the end, I use glazes more. I like especially because I use undershading a lot. So I start over zenithal and I use undershading a lot in my actual painting. So hence glazing just tends to be a better way to go. Okay. Let's see. What happened to paint-episodes? I haven't had enough time to do them recently, as I've gotten into like a regular video rotation, and I haven't had the people around who are, sort of there and to join up. I do want to do a couple, but just haven't had the time recently, unfortunately. And after recording a bunch of videos and working as much, I've been working a lot, but my work life has also gotten very crazy. So after like 80 hours a week of that, and then doing hours on videos, I tend to just want to like sit quietly in my chair and paint for a little while, rather than paint on camera for 4 to 6 hours. But I want to try to do them more. Velotron agrees with me on Vallejo metal color. Rock on. All right, we're in the same boat there. Okay. Let's see. What do you think of the Army Painter dip? I assume you mean like the true dip, not like I assume you mean like the dip, like you take your model and dip it in there, not something like their strong tone or whatever. What do I think of it? I don't like it at all. Not even a little. If I were doing some gaming figures for like if I were doing gaming zombies for like Zombicide, sure, that's fine. Beyond that, I do not like it. I don't wash my minis in general. I generally believe in placing shadows. Washing and any kind of like all over thing will generally tend to leave stains. If I were going to go something like the Army Painter dip, I would just make an oil wash, because an oil wash will stay wet so long I can wipe it off, push it in, stuff like that. It's fine if you're looking for, a decent quick shortcut to just get something on the table. But I would in general stay away from it. I don't find the value. Personal opinion. You may find it to be highly valuable, in which case, cool. I have no issue with that. I'm not here to tell anyone how to paint, but since you asked my opinion, that is my opinion. Yeah, there are just, I think, better ways to achieve what that's doing that don't make your fig look like you got it smeared in kitchen grease. So, my feeling. Let's see. Do you ever experience hand fatigue? I think is what you meant to type there, Crazy Horse, when painting. No, I don't. Not because I have particularly strong hands, but because when I paint, they're on this or something like this, right? I never hold the figure. Always keeps like, take your hand, relax all your muscles. How does your hand sit? It sits like this, right? Like this is just your fingers at rest. Okay. So the way you want to paint should be as close to that as possible. So a grip, something like that, where you're not stressing your muscles at all, where you're almost just letting friction hold the thing there, or gravity, right? That should be how it sits in your hand. If you're using something like that, you really shouldn't experience hand fatigue. And I mean, I'll sit there and hold models for 20 hours and I never get any kind of cramping or anything. If you are after that, potassium, take a potassium supplement. It sounds stupid. It's not. Like go eat a banana. Potassium increases muscle elasticity pretty quickly. So you can also that'll help your muscles relax. So yeah, either like a vitamin with potassium or just go eat a couple bananas. That should help a lot. Okay. Now, if you mean your brush hand, maybe that. Oh, as I'm reading down because you left a couple comments, your brush hand. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess probably be careful how tight you're holding your brush. Like, are you straining? Like, I would ask how tight you hold your brush. Like, I tend to barely have it in my fingertips when I'm painting. Like, it's this loose. So I would say be careful how much you're tensing. Where I have gotten cramps, just as a slight aside, is in my jaw. If I'm doing a lot of detail work for hours, I will grip my teeth sort of unknowingly. Like I'll have my jaw clenched. So that's bad. Don't do that. Okay. All right. So let's see. Okay. Yeah. All right. That looks like the last. Well, more questions, people. Let's go. There's like 30 people. Somebody ask a question. I got to the bottom of the question. There you go. Yes. So like as far as the grip things go, maybe try a different one. Find something that has a different size to it. If the brush, try to relax your hand. Beyond that, drink a lot of water. That helps. Stay hydrated. It sounds silly, but it's true. Like I drink I drink a lot of soda and crap like that, but I also drink a big glass of water every morning, every afternoon, and every night, just like a giant glass to make sure you're nice and hydrated. Keeps your muscles, more loose. That sounds weird to say. That doesn't sound right. All right. Let's see. All right, Jack Ballard. I purchased an airbrush and a bunch of Vallejo Air model paint, not knowing there was Vallejo Air game. Should I exchange them for painting Warhammer figs? I mean, my answer is I guess it depends on how easy that exchange is. If they'll let you literally just give back your model air and pick up game air, yeah, I'd make that trade. Because I do think the game air is a better set for Warhammer. Like this set right here this is all game air. Okay. Now there's model air mixed in there because there are holes in the range. The model air range is bigger, but it doesn't have like a lot of the highly saturated, intense, bright, crazy game colors, purples and pinks and weird greens and stuff. So like if you could switch it out easy, sure, but I wouldn't kill myself over it. Like if there's any kind of fight over that, because the model air set's still good and you could always just pick up a couple of the game air paints, right? Like you could always go out and get, like your Warlock purple and your Squid pink. Those are a big one that's not there. You could grab a couple of the like electric blue glue. Those are the ones that are really, it's those kind of like intense colors. I mean, you could probably like the model air set has some nice stuff in it too. So you could always just add like 10 or a dozen paints from the game air set and call it a day. And that would be fine too. In the end, they're both more or less the same consistency as far as paint goes. They both go through your airbrush without issue and they have a nice range. So I don't think one is any naturally superior to the other. It also depends on what Warhammer figs you're painting, I suppose. If you were doing like an army of Necrons, then I go get your Vallejo metal color and go to town and then just order out some like Escorpina green and, probably some light livery green out of there so you can do their eyes and their power weapons and stuff, but whatever. Okay. Let's see. Mickey, did you get in on the Kickstarter for the miniature holders by Stephen Rath? If that's a question for me, the answer is no. I've backed maybe 2 miniature Kickstarters ever related, even like to tools and things. I don't like backing Kickstarters that far in advance. You have to wait forever to get your stuff. Even when it's accessory related, I'm like, that's cool. I like the idea. If it looks like it's funded, they don't need my money. And I'll just wait. When it becomes available on the market, I'll buy it. Okay. Speaking of Kickstarters, what did I end up getting from TMS? I ended up getting the one of the 2 that I've backed, the other one being TGG2. Tabletop Miniature Solutions did their big vampire one. The other one what I got from them is the big zombie dragon, buddy. I'm excited about that guy. I wanted a big sweet zombie dragon. It was coming down to that, or like their Coven Throne, which also had like kind of a dragon body hollowed out into a canoe type of thing, which I thought was cool. But in the end, I loved the zombie dragon. I thought it was really sweet. I don't own a zombie dragon. I have mine. I turned into a Terrorgeist. I was like, that's cool. Why not? Okay. Rethan, what is your current view on 3D printing custom parts for models? I think it's cool. I have no issue with it, if that's what you're asking. I think that like things like Shapeways, where they do, like when I did the Knight Titan, which there she is, you can see her right there. When I did the Knight Titan, I looked at Shapeways because they have some interesting accessories for Knight Titans. They're not infringing on any IP. They're just supporting it with additional options or things that aren't there. Like they have a really cool Tzeentch, like Anubis head. They have a very cool wolf head for Space Wolves for your Knight Titan. If I was doing one of those, I'd be in on that like Flynn, man. That's super cool. I wouldn't be about replacing, like if it's copyright infringement, I have a problem with that. If a company's selling a thing, that's people have invested time and money to make that, like the sculptors are the people. They've done that work and they're doing that, believing that they're making a product that people will buy. These are human beings. Tom Walton, you can follow him on Twitter. He's one of my favorite. He is my favorite sculptor from GW, and he does amazing work. He did a lot of like the cool, I don't like a lot of 40K things, but if you like the big Tau robots or the Eldar like planes and stuff, he did those. And so like if they've done something cool, but if there's a hole in the market, yeah, by all means, 3D print it, grab it, pick it up, get some or some neat additions or options or stuff like that. Yeah, super cool. Like that's just more encouraging of artists and allowing them to sell stuff. That sounds great. I'm definitely all about that. Okay. So John Brennan Markham says, I don't like washes. How do I get shades in a model then? I paint them. That's the answer. Like I'll use washes. I have nothing against washes. Like the shade colors, the row of shade colors is all right there. I use all of them. I use strong tone and inks like crazy. The trick is I'm not washing a model. In other words, what I mean by that is, here's my model. When people tend to wash, they tend to think I'm just going to, this is the whole area I'm trying to wash. I get a bunch in my brush and I go bloop, bloop, and I run it over the whole area. That's how people tend to think of washes. And occasionally there will be a call to do that. If you have like very small granular detail that you can't really get a brush into, like say you've got little ridges in the handle of a sword or something, sure, I'll like wash that openly. Otherwise, what I do is, on the miniature, on her armor here, like the problem with washes is they're just heating gravity. They're not actually heating light and where light would fall. So like on her shoulder pad here, right? What I do is I took the shadow and placed it right in there, and then took another shadow and placed it right in there, and just glazed it in carefully. I might use a shade color or a wash for that. I'm just not washing the fig because I don't want to leave coffee stains. I don't want it to ever be out of control. All right. So it's about placement of the shadows as opposed to just like slap it on and let it come where it may. Now, if I'm speed painting, you can use the all over wash technique, and that's fine. Like I don't have, and again, I'm not saying you need to paint like me. I'm just explaining my own theory on this. If you like washing and you want to paint that style, knock yourself out if it's what gets your miniatures painted. but one of the tricks to do the all over wash, I think, and get rid of the coffee stain thing is, especially if you got an airbrush, wash in the middle of an airbrushing step. So if you go back and watch my speed painting Caucasian flesh tone video, I sort of base coat, slap in some, like, get some high and low lights going, wash the whole fig once in an all over fashion, one in a slightly more controlled fashion, and then go back in and then use the airbrush to quickly smooth the large flats. And then that gets rid of that coffee staining and those kind of things. Okay. Have I tried the Warcolors transparent white yet? Sounds weird, but it's awesome. No, I have not. I'm very interested. I love the idea of a transparent white. I'm going to write that down so I remember to order it. Transparent white. Okay. Need to remember to order that afterward. All right. Let's see. Have I not hung up? Why have I not hung up that dagger from NashCon? Yes, because it's sitting right there. Because I don't have anything to put it in. I have to go to I have to go to like Joann Fabrics or something and buy like a frame, like a little stand holder, picture holder thing. I will. I've got some other things I need to frame, so I should go back there anyways. Okay. I have tried a few times to do OSL, nothing complicated, but failed miserably. Any tips on making a decent light source? Sure. I talk a lot about OSL in the most recent PMP review. OSL is one of the most complicated things you can paint on a miniature. Because all painting is the study of light. All miniature painting. And now you're putting the light source on your miniature. So here's what I would say when it comes to doing OSL and having it look good. It should be small, the thing that is casting the light. The best OSL is like a glowing orb in a hand, or a torch, or a gem, or, you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's something like the size of my cell phone I'm holding relative to me. Okay. If it's bigger than that, it's just light. There's no OSL to it, because it's just become light, and it is now the dominant light source of the entire piece. Part of the tricks of OSL is that it's not the dominant light source. It's one of. If I'm standing next to a flood lamp, okay, the other lights in the room don't matter anymore. Like if it's right beside me, all the light is going to come in this direction, period. There is no other light. So make your thing that's OSL small, and think about every line you draw from that OSL and where it's going to fall. And you can't strike a match without creating a shadow. So one of the tricks to making OSL looks good, if I had a strong light right here, well, here, we'll just do this. Okay. So this is my painting light, right? I'll move it off screen there. There we go. Okay. What happened when this got real bright? And this is not a dominant light source in the room. I have lots of lights above me, both fluorescent and yellow. Okay. But when I get there, the closer I get, the more this here gets cast in shadow, right? So if I pull back, these shadows are not as pronounced. The point being is that when you do that, when you're doing OSL, you need to reinforce the shadows on the opposite side. You also want to think about what are you doing as far as like your light sources. If you've still got a zenith pixel coming up from above, how pronounced is that? Is the light coming down from above warm or cold? Is the thing that you're holding warm or cold? How are those two lights interacting? In general, contrast in this tends to work best. Like I've seen a lot of good pieces where they're holding a cold light and there's a warm light behind, or kind of opposite sides type of thing tends to look good. Think about what the materials are the light is bouncing off of, the OSL is bouncing off of. If it's hitting a white shirt cloth, it's going to tend to make it all that color. If it's hitting a black shirt, it's not going to move the color almost at all, because black absorbs light, white reflects light. It's pretty straightforward, right? If it's hitting a metal substance as opposed to a cloth substance, it's going to reflect differently. You want to move your points of light around. Like, we could spend the next 4 hours talking just about reflecting OSL. I took a 2-hour class at Adepticon this year with Kirill Kaneyev about light and the reflection of light. And this rabbit hole is real deep. So I would recommend pick a simple source like a torch, make it sort of your dominant light source, and cast some warm light on there. Final note would be the cast light needs to not be as intense or bright as the light itself. So if the torch is yellow at its hottest point to orange, in general, the torch should throw orange light, right? So not the hottest part of the light. The light is never as intense as the light, the reflected light is never as intense as the originating source. Okay. That was a long way to go, but there's so much to it. Okay. Dagobah Dave, is it overkill to use glazing medium in place of water for most purposes? I recently started using Lahmian medium and haven't used water to thin paint since. No, it's fine. I mean, your paint is effectively just some kind of pigment medium and water. So you're just using one of the other two things that makes paint be less thick. You use whichever you like. If you're using it, it's perfectly fine. You know, in general, with depending on the paint and how dense the pigment is, it will have positive effects. Certain paint reacts better with water if it's got a very high pigment density, scale 75 being a good example, but it's not, you know, whatever you like is the answer. There's absolutely nothing wrong with glazed medium and using that kind of thing. I say do it. If it's working well for you, then it's the right answer. You're not going to hurt anything if that's your question. Let's see. Will I get so Mickey said, hold on. Will you get the Wrathcore holders when they're available? I think the second point of contact will help holding models steady a lot. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'd never really had a problem. Like, for me, holding models steady, like when I need to paint detail, is lock your elbows to your side, lock your hand around the thing, and you leave your fist exposed, like the bottom of your fist exposed, and your other hand needs to lock into this hand, okay? Like as though you were firing a pistol and you needed to be very controlled with it. And so now I have no other movement here except my fingertips. Everything else is held, right? And then I can be very steady. My 2 cents. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an easier way to go about it. Give it a try. I just hate spending money, but I'm not opposed to it. Okay. Velatron, to be clear, I have more problem with making the source lighting look like it's lighting up as opposed to making the light reflection. Oh, okay. Extremely intense center point. That's the key. It needs to run from extremely hot to extremely not. And the cast light needs to be in the middle. So in other words, like a glowing orb should have an inner whiteness to it at its hottest point. Like light should effectively almost always be white or a darn near white analog at its hottest point for OSL. That's what will make the illusion get sold. I'm not saying like a lot of it. There just needs to be a hint of it or something near. A very white blue, a very white yellow, blah, 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 whatever. And that needs to be like the central point of it. If you think of like a glowing eye, what you're effectively doing is like the center of the eye needs to be white and then out to a midtone and then a dark ring. And then this needs to be mid. So it'd go light, middle, dark, middle. There you go. Okay. Crazy Horse, when will you be running your weekend long painting with a masterclass so people can come and learn from you firsthand? Oh boy, a weekend long class? I don't know if I could do that. I've been talking to people about doing some classes next year at several of the conventions. So we'll see. So if you're probably in 2018, if you come to the conventions, I'll probably have some classes. So there you go. That's the short answer to that. A whole weekend, that's a tall order. I'll need to think about that. We'll have to ease into that one. I don't think anybody wants to spend 16 hours with me. Trust me. I'm not. You're gonna get bored of me real fast. Okay, so let's see. How would you paint Grey Knight Space Marines to a good standard quickly? It's from Dean. Okay, so Grey Knights, if I remember right, are all silver. Yeah, that's their thing, right? I'm going to look up a picture of a Grey Knight so I don't screw this up, because I apologize. Space Marine chapters are not my speciality. If you had asked me about some like Imperial Guard stuff, I could probably tell you. I know lots of those guys. All right, Grey Knights. I'm Googling an image. Yeah, these are the silver guys. Okay, I was right. Oh, these dudes are easy. Okay. Well, easy's probably a bit much, but let's talk about what I would do. Okay. So Grey Knights are mostly silver and mostly metallic. So thumbs up to that. That generally can be great. What would I do? Okay. Well, I'll tell you exactly. Here we go. Ready? Ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da. Okay. So I would take these three colors, which is magnesium, the darkest, one of the dark steels. I would take dark aluminum, which is a mid-tone steel. And I would take silver, which is a highly, highly reflective, very light colored. There's what they all look like together. Okay. And I would zenithal all of the knights, all the space marines. So in other words, I would do a coat all over of, like, prime them in black or whatever. I do a coat of this more or less all over, then this from 45 degrees, and then this from 90. Okay. Then I would take some black ink. You can use whatever you like. For example, your scale color, scale 75, black ink. I learned the other day that these were made by Banshee. Banshee's the one, like, is the one who made these. Miniature painter named Banshee. He's a great painter. And it doesn't surprise me. That's why I love these so much. Anyway, I would take that, and so if this is the miniature, and I've done like the magnesium all over, and then the dark aluminum from this angle and the silver from this angle, I would then flip upside down and do black straight up to reinforce the shadows a little bit. Then I would make an oil wash out of some lamp black and maybe a slight hint of phthalo blue, because I think Grey Knights have very polished steel. So you want it to look, like it's reflecting the sky, and blue makes steel look highly polished. So I'd make a little wash out of that, and I'd wash the whole thing over. I know I said I don't like to wash, but you're asking me how to do it quick to a good tabletop standard. So here's my answer. Oil washes are different, like I said. So I'd oil wash it all over, and then I would let that sit for, I don't know, a few minutes. And then I would get out like a little makeup sponge, or the inside of a, what is this thing called? You know, this thing. These things that come in miniatures. Whatever. This material comes in a clam pack. Name eludes me. And or a big fat dry brush, and I would wipe the flats down. Get all the black, blue off of there, or mostly off of there. That should make the steel look very alive. It should give it a nice blue tone, very minimal. It should cut all the recesses. Then I'd probably go back in with my silver and touch a little bit of the highlights and edges. Yeah, there you go. And then from there, it's just details, right? Picking out purity seals and guns and faces and stuff, eyeballs. There you go. That's how I'd do it. Okay. What brushes do you recommend? Do you have any golden tip to use clear brushes? What brushes do I recommend? Well, I use Winsor & Newton Series 7. You know, you can get them, like, I think people talk about them like they're made of gold, or they're just like this hard to get thing, or super expensive. I don't find them that expensive, given the amount of time they last. You can get them on Amazon. Like, you can get a size 1 or size 0 on Amazon for like $11 or $12. And it's going to last you, like, if you take relatively decent care of it. I paint like 60 hours a week, and I get, you know, 8 months to a year or something out of my brush, depending on how big it is. So it seems like a pretty worthwhile investment. Like, I don't know what I get that thousands of hours of use out of for $10 in my life, period. I pay more money for every week at the grocery for this stuff, and I get a lot less use out of that. So, you know, Winsor & Newton Series 7 are my personal choice, but Scarf makes good brushes that are a little cheaper. Raphael and Da Vinci make good brushes that are basically the same price. You know, but don't rely always on your nice brushes. One of the keys to keep your brushes nice is don't use your nice brushes for everything. And don't use a very small brush unless you have to, and never hit something with a tip if you can avoid it. And by that, passed. Okay, it passed. I thought I was going to sneeze. By that, what I mean is like I keep crappy brushes around. Like, here you go. This is a brush that's sitting on my table right now on my desk. This is this garbage craft store junky brush. It's here because I was washing this base out, right? And pushing some shades in there. I don't want to run over that kind of a texture with a nice brush. I'll destroy it. Like literally, I would destroy it by the time I was done with this base. So the key is I save my old brushes. Like here's an old size one that I've destroyed. Okay. It still holds a tip. It just doesn't have a sharp tip. I'll just use, if I'm doing large scale base coating, I use this. Keep your paints thin. Your brushes will last longer. Wash your brushes in water more often. Don't let paint dry in the brush. Your brushes will last longer. Don't let paint get down in the ferrule of the brush. Your brushes will last more often. Keep your brushes wet before they go into the paint. If there's already water in the belly, paint can't get all the way down into the ferrule. Okay. Don't, at the end of sessions, I keep it right here beside me. Clean your brush with some Masters brush cleaner. Again, this is a good investment. It will last you for the rest of your life with one of them. I've been using mine for years. That's how much I've dug out of it. You can see that big dent in the middle that I've put into it. I'm sure I've still got, like, if you keep this sealed, lasts forever. I'm sure I've got another 10 years in that guy still, at least. Yeah, I think that's probably what I would say. Side of the brush as often as you can, never with the tip. Biggest possible brush. Use older crappy brushes when you can. Just get out your fine brushes for when they're needed. Use the appropriate brush for the appropriate work. That will make your brushes last. I know that sounds funny, but yeah, don't just use one brush. Use lots of brushes. Okay. Have you tried out the Warcolors brushes? I have not. I should give those a shot. See if I like them. That'd be good to do a product review of. So I can't give you a Crazy Horse says, send me the measurements for the dagger. I'll make you a wood holder to hang up. All right, man. That's a very nice offer of you. I'll take you up on that. Let's see. Oh boy. Okay. Okay. All right. So, do you have any advice or tips in terms of picking a good white lamp for painting? Sure. Yeah. I mean, personally, this is what I use. It is just an OttLite. There's nothing magical or sneaky about it. You can get a couple of these. They're maybe $30. They will last you a long time. They have a very heavy base. There's many different varieties of them. I like all of them. So I would say grab yourself an OttLite or two. A lot of people like having two of them, like one on each side. They stand up. Like this folds down and just turns off, and I put it away at the end of the night, or whatever. But like some people like having two of them. It's fine. I also keep a lot of ambient light around. Like right here on the other side of the screen, I have another daylight bulb casting ambient light. Like it's pointed at reflective surfaces on the wall. So it's not direct lighting. It's diffuse ambient lighting. I have a yellow light right here, and I have a fluorescent right here. So this is a pretty bright room. Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, Ralph Hummel says hello from Corsica, France. Well, hello. I hope it's a beautiful day over in Corsica, France. Let's see. Ralph Hummel supports Raphael's. Yeah, I like Raphael. I've got a Raphael brush and a Da Vinci brush I've had for quite a while. Like I said, I mean, any of those four brands are fine. I don't think there's any problem with any of them. If you treat them nice, they're good sable hair brushes that are nicely assembled. They will last you a long time. Let's see. Velotron, which one do you prefer out of army painting and single competition pieces? Happy 4th, by the way. Oh, happy 4th to you. And if what do I prefer? Both. I don't think I can do one without the other. I'd go crazy. If I was only painting competition pieces all the time, I would probably lose my mind because they're so intense. Like that Night Titan was 120 hours of like really intense work and careful freehand and, exact placement on every single detail. Everything had to be turned and examined and make sure nothing was missed and all that, right? If that was every model I painted, I would just go sit out in the garage and turn the car on. But at the same time, when I paint normal stuff, like this guy, this little, this Chimera and his rider, like all I see on him is flaws. But it's fun to just get something done and go, the flaws are fine. It looks good enough. I'm happy with it. In general, what I do to balance it out with army painting is I just try one new thing. When you're doing army painting, I pick one experimental thing I want to do with this model, and I do that. And other than that, I can paint the whole thing kind of quickly. But I try to learn from every model or group of models I paint. With this one, it was playing around with a new technique that I actually quite like, and I'm going to refine a little more, that has to do with some interesting ways to do a sort of different form of wet blending, having to do with an inks and retardant medium and stuff like that. So I'm playing around with some techniques. But the answer is both. I think a good balance. It's yin and yang is the answer. I think everybody should paint for display or competition sometimes. Even if you consider yourself an army painter, you should force yourself to sit down once a year, once every couple months, whatever, and paint something to the highest possible quality. And when you think you're done, do another 10 hours on it. That's what I'll say. I think it will be, it is a transformative experience when you stop painting to be done and start painting to achieve a particular effect. That is the singular moment I can recognize in my painting, when I stopped painting to be done. And I started thinking instead about every element of the piece and what it needed to look like, and said, this is going to take as long as it takes until everything looks exactly how I want, every component. So there you go. Do you know anywhere to get ruined arches and pillars for making bases? Yes, Mickey, absolutely. I'll give you 3 options. 1, go to competitionminis.com. They have a bunch of basing materials and scenic things, actually, like sort of plinth style arches and cuts and all this great stuff. They have them for both like 28 mil, 54 mil, and 75 mil. Competitionminis.com. Michigan Toy Soldier. If you go to their section, if you shop by category, which is having a 20% off deal right now. I don't have any kind of relationship with Michigan Toy Soldier. I know this just because I purchased something from them today, because they sent me an email that said you get 20% off. And so I went and bought some stuff. They have a section that has lots of different things like that. Specifically, if you go to shop by category and you look for like bases and displays, and then maybe you go to like scenic details. Anyways, if you look in there, there's a bunch of stuff. You can spend the next 3 or 4 hours looking through tons of arches and walls and cisterns and sandbags and barrels and every other thing you can imagine. It's crazy. So check that out. Third option would be make them yourself with Hurst Arts molds. Hurst Arts, I couldn't tell you the exact numbers, but there's a couple different arch molds in there, so you could always pour your own. And that's exactly what Crazy Horse answered too. Yeah, I have a couple of ones that have arches in them I've used before. I do quite like them, but obviously they require, it's easier to just go buy something, I suppose, than pour a mold, but there you are, as you like. Okay, let's see. Dead Gamer, Vince, Papa Nurgle has appeared before you with an ultimatum. Paint one of my minions to a satisfying standard, or I shall turn your fingers into withering tentacles and you never paint again. What would you paint? Boy, let's see. What single Nurgle model would I paint if I was forced at effectively gunpoint to paint? I think probably a Nurgle Demon Prince would be fun, because that isn't a well-defined thing. So you can kind of do whatever you want with it. It would give lots of good conversion opportunities. Gutrot's a good character, but I don't know that I could ever do him better than the Slayer Sword entry, or even something like that approaches that. Not that I'm painting anything better than any of those people, and most figures have won great awards. But I'm just so critically aware of the beauty of that piece. It's one of the most striking pieces I've ever seen. So I would feel intimidated by it. Other than that, I like one of the new Death Guard guys. I think are pretty good. Like, they're real interesting. And if I could be sneaky with Papa Nurgle, the answer would be a Nurgling. Suck it, Nurgle. Because I like Nurglings. They're cute and adorable little guys. I'll paint a single Nurgling. All right, so there you go. John Brendan Markham, to date, favorite model you've painted or something in the top 5? Sure. I mean, there's lots of them. I don't know that I could easily pick one. The Night Titan's up there. I love that guy. All the things on the bottom. Alario was fun. The Lord of Change was fun. The Night Titan was fun. But actually, the Savage Beauty, which was you can't really see her. I'm pointing at something you can't see, but she's like right here. But it's the 75 millimeter from Black Sun Miniatures. That model was such a gorgeous model and an absolute pleasure to paint from top to bottom. It was just, I mean, it was transcendent. It's one of the best sculpts I've ever put paint to. So there you go. Okay. Let's see. What's a good way to get a cool white color that is quick enough for army painting? Cool white that's quick enough for army painting. So, I mean, if you've got an airbrush, it becomes a lot easier because you can generally get a good coat out of that. But assuming you don't, I would take I would order some Vallejo Extra Opaque Heavy Blue Gray. This is a cold gray, works excellent as a base. I would mix this in with a dab of blue and a dab of white to lighten it up a little. It will still have amazingly smooth coverage. Mix this with a little bit of Flow Aid, and then you can just push some highlights around with a regular white, say like a War Colors white, because it doesn't tend to chalk or something like that. And I would go from there. I like this because when mixed with Flow Aid, this covers supremely well in one coat, but does not... but is it's super smooth. The Flow Aid prevents it from being too thick. So there you go. That's how I would get it. And then, I just mix a little blue in. I don't know that I'd pick a particular paint. Most white blues tend to be fairly underwhelming. I like looking around looking around this world of paints I have around me. I don't know that I have a white blue I regularly use because I find them all really annoying. They're all like things like this sky blue, this kind of crap. It's just garbage. I would rather mix it myself. That's what I'll say. So, for whatever that's worth. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Have you ever toyed with the idea of painting a whole army at a competition level, probably an army with less models, such as Beastclaw Raiders? Oh, yeah, absolutely, I have. I mean, I'd like to think I've done at least, that was the idea when I did my Bretonnians. I did them the absolute best I could do. I spent at least 10 hours on every night. And, like I did one night a day, or a day, 8 to 10 hours a night. K night, Knigget. But I didn't, and, tried to freehand every one of them. Lots of colors and layers and things like that, like different, effects. And every one of them was their own little individual beautiful snowflake. But, looking back on it now, all I see is all the flaws and techniques that I wasn't very good at. So, yes, I have thought about it a lot. It would have to be the right army. I think I've tried to take my Tzeentch army to a high standard. I think I've tried to take I took my Sylvaneth to a high standard, but something that's truly display quality. Yeah, I mean, probably whatever I decide to paint next as like a full-on army project. Just because, if possible, if the figs can do it, because why not? I have enough armies at this point. I can play, every game of Warhammer for the rest of my life and never need a new army. So why not take the time? But we'll see. Okay, Robert McGonigal, do you have a preferred airbrush? Is it worth spending 150-ish if you can afford it? I do have a preferred airbrush. The Iwata Eclipse HPCS is my preferred airbrush. But Iwata makes a ton of good airbrushes. You can, whatever you like. The Highline is also a good one. Even the lower end Neo ones are still pretty darn good. Is it worth spending the money? The answer, I'm going to answer your question with a question. Is it your first airbrush? If it is your first airbrush, the answer is no. Go get yourself a piece of crap master airbrush like a G23 for $20 and learn your airbrush. Learn how to clean it. Learn how to disassemble it. Learn how to put it back together. You need to be like Forrest Gump in Forrest Gump, where he takes the rifle apart. Okay, like once you can do that, with your airbrush. Get it clean, stripped, back together like that. Once you can get good control and get your colors where you want, once you learn how to lay shadows, how to sort of, actually control the dual action of it with a crappy airbrush, go to an Iwata. You don't buy a BMW for your first car because you're going to screw it up. And you will screw up your first airbrush, and that's okay. So that's all right. Everybody has, that's just the learning curve. You mess up your first brushes, your first minis aren't exactly things that belong in the, in a museum. It's the same with an airbrush. Is it then 6 months later worth spending the money? Yes. Yes, it is. Okay. Dead Gamer says Nurgle is pleased with my choice. All right, well, good. Well, thanks, Nurgle. I appreciate that, buddy. Okay. Let's see. Velatron, which painters do you hold in the highest regard? Boy, that's a long question. All right, very quick list without admitting that I am openly forgetting people. Okay, and I apologize. So I'm doing this off the top of my head. Jessica Rich, who's painted my single favorite model I've ever seen of all time. Aaron Lovejoy, Jen Haley, Kirill Kanayev, Banshee, Roman and Rafa, so Roman Lapat and Rafael Pica, David Soper. God, I'm forgetting so many people, but like off the top of my head, there's a fast. Meg Maples, another fantastic, beautiful painter. Marika Reimer, can't forget Marika. Yeah, there's just like off the top of my head, there's a very fast list. There are many more that I follow and enthusiastically support. But those are sort of all people that I consider just doing absolutely phenomenal work. Francesco Farabi was another one. There's more, but there you go. As I said, like I forgot like 20 people I really love there because I'm doing it fast, but there you go. Follow all of them on Putty and Paint and their Facebook and stuff like that. All those kinds of things. It's very worth it. Okay, Vindicatus. Hey, Vince, I've got a question about choosing zenithal highlighting colors. I've got a fairly bright yellow that I'm struggling with finding good mid and low tones with. Oh, sure. Okay. Well, good yellow, mid, and low tones. I'll show you what I use. I zenithal like normal, and then I cover the whole thing in sepia ink, and then I mid-tone with light rust. Light rust, Vallejo Model Air Light Rust. This is your yellow undershading dream come true, my friend. This, once you go over it with yellow, turns into such a wonderful, rich, kind of almost orange ochre. It looks like yellow shadow. Secret tech right here. Light rust. There you go. Hope that helps. That's what I undershade all my yellow stuff in. I also use it a lot for flesh tones and other heavily like, well, orange-based things. I'm knocking over paintbrushes. Okay. I really need another brush holder. I have too many brushes. There we go. Okay. Moving on. Any advice for painting ethereal ghostly blue? I keep getting a pastel look. Yeah, you're getting a pastel because you're mixing the blue and the white, I would suspect. The answer is only paint mid-tone blue and white. Don't blend them. You glaze them. So what I mean by that is all blue. Let's do the fast version. All blue, dry brush white, wash blue. Dry brush white, wash blue. Dry brush white, wash blue. Like covering different areas each time, different amounts. What that's going to do is it's tinting your white, and you're going to build up intensity in the low points, but it can't go darker. The bottom that this can get to is that mid-tone color, right? Because it can't, you can keep stacking it on itself, but it's just itself. And then because you're not mixing it, you're not actually making a egg blue, like an Easter egg blue. You're only filtering white with blue. So there you go. Let's see. Any tips for correcting painting mistakes? Yeah, paint over them, I guess. That's a very flip answer. Just paint over them. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what you mean. You'll have to, I'm not like, generally anything you screw up, you can paint over, is what I'll say. I don't think I've ever stripped a model I'm mid-painting. I've painted over things before. Like this girl, I thought the purple to pink transition armor would look cool. It doesn't look cool. It looks bad. So I was like, nope. Probably have to fire that off the roof. Is varnishing at least, say, save point technique any good? Oh, so like varnishing to create a save point? Sure, like varnishing just protects the mini, but you can paint over varnish. Like I'll varnish in the middle of steps, in the middle of painting frequently. You can do it if you want a wash to flow a little smoother or get pulled off easier. If you're going to use an oil wash, it's important to get a decent varnish layer on there. Probably gloss, though not essential. I mean, you can still strip something off if it worst case. But in general, you can't really ruin minis by putting paint on them, unless it's thick, unless it's so thick that you just run out of you start obscuring detail. But as long as you keep your paints thin and controlled, you really can go for a lot of layers and fix things. I guess that's my answer. But yeah, like the varnish thing is generally helpful, just a good middle ground. Let's see. And then, he said, do you prefer covering mistakes with another layer of paint? Yes, in general. I mean, if I make the mistake quickly, like if I notice it, I paint intentionally. And if I see the error, I keep some spare brushes beside me. I grab one of the extra brushes, get it wet, and then go and just pull that extra paint off. Right? Just use it like an eraser. And if your paint is fairly wet, if you're working in relatively thin, wet paint, you should be able to zip anything right back off of there without repainting. If you're talking about something you didn't notice and it dried, yeah, you just got to repaint it. Okay. Okay. Let's see. All right. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. All right, so display boards. You're not a huge fan. Any tips on them, though? Sure. So my general thought on display boards is I'm not a huge fan of them. I find them to be a distraction. Unless they're like you're specifically creating a scene for some kind of weird big diorama, because they're not, I don't find them useful for any purpose. The utility of them I find highly dubious. That is to say, when you're making terrain, you're making something for your table for the game. When you're working on your figs, you're creating art, and then it has an extra purpose that you get to play with it. The display board is literally for this weird 1 hour period where theoretically you're leaving your army out for paint judging at a tournament. That's hard for me to judge. Now, that being said, sure. I mean, go to your local Home Depot or Lowe's, grab yourself some 2 foot by 2 foot MDF, cut into it, shape it, build it up, whip out everything. Like my advice is get it all out. Go get rocks and dirt from your yard or tree branches or whatever. Get some paste, cover everything up, put lots of different height variation. Display boards look the best when they have lots of, because you've gone from a tiny section of a base, right, that where it could be relatively flat, and that's okay because this is this much of the earth you're capturing, to capturing what in the span of the world is actually a pretty big amount of space. So it better have varied heights, right? So you need hills and different layers and levels. Get out your DAP is going to be your best friend here. DAP, your all-purpose spackling paste. Best friend when it comes to doing big display boards or stuff like that, because you can just DAP over a lot of the board, the different layers, and get, create nice smooth hills. Get out pastes, grit, sand, like aquarium stores or pet stores are your friend for fish tank terrain, but make sure you paint over it. Lots of rocks, different textures on the ground are very important. Don't keep a uniform texture unless there's some very distinct reason why it should be. And I mean very distinct, like you're doing an ocean, right? If the board is an ocean, then it should be theoretically the texture is all water, but there should be lots of waves and different things like that breaking it up. But if you're doing earth of some kind, there should be little rocks and sand and big rocks and trees and, you know, all sorts of detritus and things like that. Nature's very messy and varied. So all that stuff should be happening on your board if you want it to look accurate. Okay. Let's see. Looking to make a ruined temple jungle thingy. Look up the Terrain Wench on YouTube. She hasn't put anything up in a long time, but she has several good tutorials where she takes you through making a couple jungle pieces of terrain. Steal those, put them on your board. That would be my answer there. Terrain Wench. Okay. Like she will literally walk you through making a whole temple and water feature and like a spawning pool. It's great stuff. She did a couple different lizardman type terrain pieces. And it's a good explanation. She's a good teacher. Okay. Any tips for a slow painter like me, 1 to 2 minis max a week to painting quicker? Sure. I can give you lots of good advice. I would hope that's the part of the point of this whole series. Here we go. Top 5 tips for painting faster. Number 1, buy an airbrush. Probably that sounds stupid, but it's the most, it will speed up your painting like nothing else in the universe. Step 2, zenithal highlight. Airbrushes make it easier. It doesn't have to be the case. Don't paint over straight black. If I could destroy one thing in the universe, it would be painting over straight black. Everybody would just zenithal naturally. Spray cans would spray zenithal. So even if you're just using a spray can, black, take white, shoot it directly from above. Tip the 3rd, care less about your base coats and how accurate they are. By that, I mean you can fix things later faster than you can by trying to take a whole lot of time to be extremely careful. If you're just trying to paint quick, get base coats down. I'm not going to tell you to go the James Wapple route where he uses like a size 8 brush and just like slaps colors roughly in the area and then just corrects over time as he paints the rest of the high and low lights. You don't have to go like that, but you know, use a big brush, get your thin paint, go over zenithal and go on there, look up sketch style or undershading, you know, glazing over zenithal. I've got a couple different videos on my channel about it. You'll get things done a lot faster going that direction. 4, play with blending techniques and figure out which ones you like. Like loaded brush is an especially fast technique, so play with that. And tip the 5th is think about, make sure you start knowing roughly where you want your miniature to go. So that is just, but don't be bound to it. Like have a good idea of what colors you're using, where they're going. Take a few minutes beforehand to look at your miniature and really understand where everything's going to get placed and then execute to that. Final bonus tip, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I guarantee you your figs aren't perfect. I've never seen one of your figs, but I know it isn't perfect. You know how I know that? Because nobody's figs are perfect. Anywhere in the world ever in the history of painting. Every fig has things that could be done differently. Focus on just doing a good job and getting something that you like and enjoy. Yeah, so there you go. Okay. All right. Oh, good. So he's responding. Okay, so he's got an airbrush. He does that. These are good. All right. I'm sorry. I'm looking at your responses. 3. Okay, that's good. 4. Looking at that. Okay, good. All right, good. Glad those were helpful. All right, very quickly here. Do I dry tree branches before painting them? Some people like bake them, I think, in the oven or something. I don't. I just use them. Whatever. Just prime them, varnish them, seal them, whatever. I mean, mine are sitting there for a long time. I don't like do anything special with them. I generally collect dry branches out of the yard and then let them sit for a long time. So I suppose they're dried out. I've never had any go brittle on me. Like I have some that are very old. I don't know. It's my answer. I don't worry about it too much, I guess is what I would say. What lighting do you use for painting? An OTT light, white light from an OTT. OTT, LITE, in case anyone is curious what I'm saying there. And yes, Like, you need to have a clean, white, neutral, white balanced bulb to paint. You bet your bottom dollar. Or your model will look very different in different lights. Okay. Let's see. Okay. What was the name of the diorama tutorial channel? Well, I don't know about dioramas, but like if I was like, what I was specifically referencing was the terrain wench. Wench, like bar wench. WENCH. Terrain wench. It's a great YouTube channel. I'll put it down in the comments afterward. So you can link out to it. Like I said, she hasn't posted any videos for a long time. I don't know if she's out of the hobby. But even that, her channel has a lot of great advice in it. Things I still use to this day for doing like water effects and stuff like that. So there you go. I would also check out Terranscapes. Has some great stuff out there too. And then obviously the Terrain Tutor. I mean, you know, Mel the Terrainiac. He is the absolute man when it comes to all things terrain related. So there you go. Any little advice on feathers? Sure, make them varied in color. Feathers are not monotone things, so they should have lots of different colors worked into them. And that can be as simple as through repeated different layers of washes and dry brushes. And that's perfectly fine. You don't need to get to any more complicated techniques. If you don't want to, you can, but you don't have to. Just make sure that they're varied. If you look at like an eagle or a bird or something like that, their feathers tend to have lots of different colors in them. Like, really look. You look at it, and that's my number one advice for painting in general, is start really looking at the world around you. And by that, what I mean is when we look at things, we tend to just see things and our brain sort of computes in shortcuts. I stare at people's hair a lot when I'm out in public. I imagine most people find that weird. I don't know. Hopefully they don't notice. But I stare at hair a lot because I'm fascinated by the transition of hair color being one of the most complicated things to paint. Like, I have ostensibly dark brown hair, but if you look, you can see this ridge, this line of light right here where my hair doesn't look the same dark brown, but you can see how there's still the dark spots in it, right? And all that. So hair is a complicated thing to paint. Look at the real world and draw inspiration from it. Same thing there. Don't be a creeper. Don't stare at people weirdly, like I'm doing, I guess. Don't do that. All right. I only use one light source. I have one. I mean, like I said, technically I have two, because I have, like I said, I have another light right here that is the same daylight bulb, but it's not pointed directly at my painting area. It's pointed at a reflective surface on the wall, so that way it diffuses the light out over the whole area. So I have one direct and one indirect. Whatever you like. Okay. All right. So I think I got to the bottom of the questions, and I'm at longer than I was going to go, but that's okay. There were so many good questions I didn't even notice how much time went by. I generally do these for an hour. We're at like an hour 20. So here's what I'll say. I'll do like 5 more minutes. So if there's more questions, put up your final questions now. And then we'll call it. But yes, so just to go on about looking in the real world. When you look at like cars, we tend to see a car and go, the car is red or the car is blue. But really stop. Force your eyes to look at the car. Look at how the reflection lines are captured on there. Where are the hot spots on the chrome around the edges? What isn't the same color? Like, things in the world have an incredible amount of detail, and our brains tend to sort of smooth it over. But if you stop and really, really, really look, you can find so many more nuances to the world around you that you can then inspire you in your painting, right? You look at a tree, you look at like the trunk of a tree, it's brown, but it's not. Really stop, really look at it. Look at all the different greens and grays and purples and all these other things that are in that bark, right? And you can bring that into your painting, and it makes those things come to life. Okay. Let's see. Ryan Taylor, how do you stay motivated to paint an army? Also, any tips on how to stay motivated and efficient in a painting session? How do you stay motivated? I'm a bad person. I've got this question a lot, and I'm a bad person to answer you. because I am incredibly motivated to paint. Like, I have an extreme passion for this. And like I said, I do it 40 to 60 hours a week. So I don't really need a lot of help, but that's not fair. That's not what you're asking. So I'll say two things. I have a video in my hobby cheating series called the top 5 motivational tips to stay painting. I would direct you to that video. Check that one out, Ryan. I go into a lot more detail on motivational tricks, but here's what I would say. Short answer is this: paint what you love, figures that you're interested in, as much as you can. When you can't, when there is painting in an army you have to do because something's rote, 50 halberdiers is the classic example. I don't care about the 50 halberdiers. I've got to do them because I've got to have halberdiers. What I really like to paint is the big dude on the Griffin and a steam tank or whatever. I'm just picking a singular army. Okay, mix them up. Make one your reward for the other. If you really want to do the steam tank, say, I'm going to do 30 halberdiers in batch, and then I'll reward myself with the steam tank. I painted my entire Sylvaneth, and as an inspiration, I saved Alarielle for last. I knew that Alarielle was waiting at the end of the road for me, and I couldn't wait to just lavish time on her and let her be the last final expression of that army. Okay? So treat yourself is the answer. Keep a second small project to the side that is very different. If you're working on a, Empire army, keep like a 40K Juggernaut on the side or something, or whatever. I don't care. Just, you get what I mean. Something very different. And when you're bored of the army, go to that figure, work on that a little, and then go back to your army. Change it up a little bit. Always try new techniques. Don't feel like you have to paint the same thing in the same technique because you're in one army. Evolve your techniques and try new things. Who cares? If you said, well, the army won't be perfectly uniform. Who gives a crap? The army won't be perfectly uniform anyways because it's a human being. You're a human being, and we vary things naturally. Colors will never match completely exactly. If we got out the spectrometer, like, it doesn't matter. Push yourself. In the end, if you're learning, if you're experimenting, if you're improving your craft, you're going to be motivated to keep going. There you go. Short answers. All right. Velatron, I won't read all of that, but thank you. I appreciate that very much. I very much like this and the interaction, and I appreciate that it's helpful. I love to give back to the community. Not just because it's fun. Like, this is great. I love it when I see other people paint amazing things and improve their hobby. And this is art, and it's fun, and it's a passion of mine. And part of what keeps me motivated is sharing my passion with other people. So it's really that easy. Okay. Let's see. All right. Will you come to Europe for a competition one day? I'd love to. One day? Yes. I don't know when. I have no idea, but yes. Yep. I'll be painting competition for theoretically years and years to come. So yeah, absolutely. I'll be over there eventually. How do you know when you're finished? Depends on what I'm aiming at. If I'm, let me say something about how I paint. I paint every section of the model. I don't do the whole model and then start building from there. So, like, what I mean is, take the Chaos Knight guy here. Okay. Like, the spear tip, I did just the spear tip to completion and then moved on to something else. And then did this piece to completion and so on and so forth when I'm doing an individual model. So how do I know I'm done? When I've done every component on him. But the answer is when I feel like I'm done. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you beyond that. Given what I was trying to achieve. If I'm trying to achieve a model for the tabletop, then when I feel like I've achieved that. If there's some mistakes, who cares? If it's for a display or competition, then when I've felt like I have as few mistakes as I can, and I look at the whole fig and don't get any like, is that okay? If you're painting for competition, you ever ask yourself, is that okay? It's not. Fix it. That's the answer. It sucks you don't want to. It's easy to trick yourself. You'll go, is that okay? Maybe. No. Fix it. If you ever pause and go, fix it. Don't wait. Don't argue with yourself, because you will convince yourself not to do the good work. And then the judge will tell you later, you didn't do that thing. And you're going to be like, darn it, I saw that thing and I let myself trick myself. I've done it lots of times. Me personally, I'm speaking from experience here. I've done that a lot. Don't let it happen. There you go. Okay. What non-mini RPG games do you play? Not much. Most of what I do is RPGs and mini games. I mean, I played Magic for many, many years. I still occasionally get a game of Magic in, but I still have all my cards and everything. But I don't play often. Occasional board games, I suppose, like a good game of Cards Against Humanity or Secret Hitler or something like that. But not too many. It's more or less relegated to this. Okay. Let's see. Best method to make trees. Wire trees or just a branch and build up the leaves. Yes. My answer is yes. Do either. Both are fine. If I've used both techniques and they're both fine. I go to like Michael's. Oh, here they are. And I get these wreaths, these little sticks. You know, you can get these for like $1 or $2 a piece, and I use these for like sticks and branches and stuff in the world. I get like Spanish moss for like actual leaf clusters and vegetation clumps and stuff like that. But I also just like make small wire armatures and then cover them with milliput or something like that. It's all fine. I mean, I don't know that there's one I particularly love more than the other, or just buying trees. Like there's lots of trees you can just buy from miniature companies. As long as you do extra work on them, repaint them, they'll look fine. So there you go. One more thing. When I'm using Vallejo Liquid Gold, sometimes I get a different effect using paint from the same bottle. Probably has to do with how much it's mixed. The alcohol to pigment ratio in those often varies a lot. Get a big heavy metal thing, well, non-ferrous metal thing in there, like an old pewter or fig, and make sure you shake the living bejesus out of it to get it really efficiently mixed and thin it with 90+% alcohol. So I keep like 91% alcohol, and I actually put a couple drops in every time I pour it out of the pot, get a nice, even, consistent, smooth running liquid gold. Okay. Let's see. I've already done more than the 5 minutes I said I was going to do. All right, but that's fine. Good tips to create points of interest and bits of color in an Imperial Guard army that's supposed to have a toned down and realistic regimental army look. Color, weathering, rust, numbers, decals like regimental numbers, lenses, gun, laser sights being bright red. Yeah, all of those things, right? So like some mix of all of that. Rust can go very orange. Laser sights and eyepieces and things like that can be very red. The things like numbers and decals can be white. Scratch them up, scuff them a little, run some sepia or some color over them so they look like they've, rust has hit it or whatever. Like pick a bunch of different things so it doesn't look like shock stark. But all of those things will help create little visual points of interest on rote military troops. My answer would be go look at like people who do World War II tanks and soldiers, because they struggle with that as a matter of course, right? That's like their life, is trying to create visual interest in people wearing a bunch of olive clothing, driving olive colored tanks. So look at their tricks for doing it. Like look at those tanks and look at it and say, what's drawing my eye here? What did they do? Is it battle damage? Is it weathering effects? Is it slight pushing of the color filters, things like that? Okay. So there we go. I think we'll call it right there at an hour and a half. So, Christopher Nelson, your final thing. 1 year for April Fools, you should let Tom host Warhammer Weekly. That would be funny. I agree. I should just literally throw him in front of it though one day and not tell him, because there's no way he's going to watch this to this point. So I should just literally start the show and be like, all right, Tom, you're hosting. Go ahead. I'm just going to sit here. I'll do the news. I think that would be fun. I agree. All right. Well, there we go. That brings us to the end of another Q&A. I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope you found that useful. I hope we answered plenty of good questions for you and talked about fun techniques. I try to do these as often as I can. Normal hobby cheating will still be, coming every normal weekend. I'll think more about whether or not we're going to re-record some of those old videos where I've evolved some techniques and can have some better sound. So as always, I very much appreciate you watching. Appreciate all the awesome questions. That's great. Look forward to more hobby cheating in the future. Thank you very much, everybody. And as always, we'll see you next time. Have a good, happy 4th, everybody.